Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's What Should Have Won the Oscars video series. In these videos, I go year by year over the past 30 years, naming the movies nominated for Best Picture and the film that won, and the film I felt should have won. These videos are, of course, in honor of the 87th Academy Awards, which just took place this past weekend. What I've noticed is that whenever anyone talks about the Oscars, they always bring up how big of a sham it is and how it's just about what's popular or what gives them the most money, and oftentimes they choose films because of internal reasons rather than what's actually good. Now, I don't entirely disagree with these sentiments, but the thing is, whenever people give specific movies that should have won, or movies that didn't win, or movies that didn't deserve to win, I almost inevitably disagree with these people just as much as I disagree with the Oscars themselves. For example, I was watching an online show with 4 film critics griping about the choices for the most recent Oscars, and then they went on about how corrupt or out of touch the Academy Awards are, and then they named a couple of films that they would have chosen, and in my opinion they were just as wrong and out of touch as the Oscars. Personally, I think film critics get together and they all decide they're right because they agree with each other, but in many cases they're just as out of touch as the Oscars are on what people in general consider good movies. So overall, I don't find these criticisms of the Oscars to be entirely unfounded, but I think they do get more flack than they deserve because everyone's got different opinions, and many people are just sour because the Oscars don't match up with their own personal opinion. Which basically are what these 3 videos are going to be about what the Oscars would be like if I was king of the Oscars and everyone had to do my bidding and go by my opinion. And the thing is, I expect you to disagree with me just as much as you disagree with the Oscars, perhaps more. And that's fine. I don't claim to know the ultimate truth about films, as I feel many of these aforementioned film critics so arrogantly do. I'm just stating my own opinions on the matter, and I know a few of my choices will be widely unpopular. So this video is for 1985 through 1999. My next video will be for 2000 through 2014. And my third video, I will give out my own awards, if you will, that I will make my nominations for as I go along. The awards I will be naming are the worst year for Best Picture nominees, film least worthy of being nominated for Best Picture, least worthy movie to win Best Picture, best year for Best Picture nominees, film that most deserved to win Best Picture but wasn't even freaking nominated, film that most deserved to win Best Picture but didn't, and best choice for Best Picture. And as I said, I'll name my nominees as I go along. Just a few clarifications before I begin. When I name the year, I'm going by the year the movies were released, not the year the Academy Award ceremony was held. For example, you might be thinking, why aren't you doing the 2015 Oscars? But I am. I'm just calling it 2014 because that's the year the films were released. Also, I'm only covering Best Picture. I'm not covering Best Actor, Screenplay, Director, anything like that because that would just take forever. So since I'm covering the past 30 years, that means I'm beginning with 1985. And the films nominated for Best Picture in 1985 were The Color Purple, Kiss of the Spider Woman, Out of Africa, Prizzi's Honor, and Witness. And the winner was Out of Africa. And what should have won was The Color Purple. To be honest, it's a long time since I've seen The Color Purple, and I don't remember it that well, but I do remember it being an interesting film about the African American history. What I do remember is that Out of Africa was a horribly boring film that did not deserve Best Picture. When I was a little kid growing up in the 80s, I remember thinking of Oscar films as really boring films I'd stay away from. When I grew older, I came to appreciate Oscar films and thought I only thought that way back then because I was too young to understand them. But when I actually went back and watched some of these films that won the Oscars in the 80s, I realized, nope, Oscar movies were actually much more boring back then. And Out of Africa is a prime example. It's a cure for insomnia. This film has no plot, no reason, no purpose, just a bunch of boring, pointless scenes thrown together. So Out of Africa gets my nomination for least worthy movie to win Best Picture. So moving on to 1986, where the nominees were Children of a Lesser God, Hannah and Her Sisters, The Mission, Platoon, and A Room with a View. And the winner was Platoon, and what should have won was Platoon. To be honest, I haven't seen any of these other films nominated, but from what I hear, A Room with a View is just as boring as Out of Africa. I liked Platoon. It was a really good classic film that showed the horrors of war, so I do think it deserved to win. So Platoon gets my nomination for Best Choice for Best Picture. Next, 1987, where the nominees were Broadcast News, Fatal Attraction, Hope and Glory, The Last Emperor, and Moonstruck. And the winner was The Last Emperor, and what should have won was none of them. In my opinion, none of these films nominated deserve to win Best Picture. There were two movies that deserved to win Best Picture that came out that year, and they were Full Metal Jacket and The Untouchables, which are kind of odd choices for me, as I typically am not a fan of Stanley Kubrick films nor of mobster movies. But these are two films I love despite my distaste for their genres. Either one would be far more deserving than The Last Emperor, which was a fairly boring, fairly forgettable film. Not to mention all the other films nominated were pretty bad, particularly Fatal Attraction, which I saw a few years ago, and it was horrible. It was a horrible film. I watched it for a class I was doing on gender in the media as an example of a film that portrays a chauvinistic and fairly sexist view of women, and it does. But that's not the only reason why that film sucked. It was overall just a very bad film. The fact it was nominated over masterpieces like Full Metal Jacket and The Untouchables is an insult to movie fans everywhere. So 1987 gets my nomination for Worst Year for Best Picture nominations. Full Metal Jacket and The Untouchables get my nominations for film that most deserved to win Best Picture but wasn't even freaking nominated. And Fatal Attraction gets my nomination for film least worthy of being nominated. Next, 1988, where the nominees were The Accidental Tourist, Dangerous Liaisons, Mississippi Burning, Rain Man, and Working Girl. And the winner was Rain Man. What should have won? Rain Man. So another example where I was in agreement with Oscar's choice. Rain Man was a pretty strong film with some powerful performances. I don't think any of these other choices this year were any good, with the exception of Mississippi Burning, which was a fairly decent film, but no competition for Rain Man, which deserved to win. So Rain Man gets my nomination for Best Choice for Best Picture. Next, 1989, where the nominees were Born on the 4th of July, Dead Poets Society, Driving Miss Daisy, Field of Dreams, and My Left Foot. And the winner was Driving Miss Daisy. What should have won? Dead Poets Society. As a side note, I remember this was the first year growing up that I watched the Oscars, and I made a point to see most of the films nominated. Never did get around to seeing Born on the 4th of July, though. And at the time, I felt Field of Dreams should have won, but now I'm a bit older, that film seems a bit hokey to me, and Dead Poets Society much more, much wiser. However, even back then, I felt Driving Miss Daisy didn't deserve it. Overall, an average film about some old person whining and treating a guy like crap because he's black. If I have to hear her say Piggly Wiggly one more time, I'm gonna frickin' shoot myself. So I'll give it to Dead Poets Society because it was the best out of the lot, but My number one choice would be Glory, which I think was clearly the best picture this year, which I was prepared to name only to discover it wasn't nominated. So Glory gets my nomination for film that most deserved to win Best Picture but wasn't even frickin' nominated. Next, 1990, where the nominees were Awakenings, Dances with Wolves, Ghost, The Godfather Part 3, and Goodfellas. And the winner was Dances with Wolves, and what should have won was Dances with Wolves. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of mobster movies, and that includes The Godfather and Goodfellas. Awakening was a good movie. I've seen it a billion times when I was a teenager, but Dances with Wolves was a masterpiece that far deserved Best Picture. Dances with Wolves was so good. The narrative structure was masterfully executed, as it told the story of someone who made a massive change in his life and became part of a culture he totally misunderstood before that. It was just amazing. And yes, I much prefer this film in its pure form rather than its 2009 science fiction version called Avatar. But I can't believe Ghost was nominated. That was a movie I liked when it first came out, but watching it later as an adult, I realized it was god awful. I can't believe a movie so bad would be nominated for Best Picture. So Dances with Wolves gets my nomination for Best Choice for Best Picture, and Ghost gets my nomination for film least worthy of being nominated. Next is 1991, where the nominees were Beauty and the Beast, Bugsy, JFK, The Prince of Tides, and The Silence of the Lambs. The winner was The Silence of the Lambs, and what should have won was The Silence of the Lambs. JFK was a good movie. Beauty and the Beast, an alright cartoon flick. Not sure why it was nominated. Prince of Tides was awful, and Bugsy is one of the worst films I've ever seen. So Silence of the Lambs totally deserved it. I believe it won all major awards, Best Actor, Actress, Director, Screenplay, Picture, and it totally deserved it. The performances in this film were amazing, and it was just executed so well. I was really surprised that a crime thriller won Best Picture, but I can think of no other film that deserved it more. So Silence of the Lambs gets my nomination for Best Choice for Best Picture, and Bugsy gets my nomination for a film least worthy of being nominated. I remember it was one of the few films I saw in the theater I was really tempted to walk out on. Next, 1992, where the nominees were The Crying Game, A Few Good Men, Howard's End, Scent of a Woman, and The Unforgiven. And the winner was The Unforgiven. What should have won? The Unforgiven. The Crying Game was severely overrated. Howard's End was one of the movies that looked so boring I wouldn't see it. Scent of a Woman was a silly movie. And A Few Good Men was really good, but The Unforgiven was a groundbreaking movie that flipped the whole Western genre on its head by portraying a more realistic version of the Old West, where there were no good guys or bad guys, and it just showed the plain, dark truth of what it was probably like. So The Unforgiven gets my nomination for Best Choice for Best Picture. Next is 1993, where the nominees were The Fugitive, In the Name of the Father, The Piano, The Remains of the Day, and Schindler's List. And the winner was Schindler's List, and what should have won was Schindler's List. This is the fourth year in a row, I think, that the Oscars got it right. What can I say? It looks like they were on a roll in the early 90s. It's hard to argue with Schindler's List being a timeless classic. It was the most heartbreaking, brutally honest, and moving portrayal of the Holocaust ever put to screen, and it was obvious everyone involved did their absolute best. In the Name of the Father was okay. The Piano was kind of boring. The Remains of the Day was another movie I refused to see because it looked boring. And The Fugitive? Are you freaking kidding me? It was an okay action thriller film, but Best Picture? No freaking way. So, Schindler's List gets my nomination for Best Choice for Best Picture, and The Fugitive gets my nomination for film least worthy of being nominated. So next is where the Oscars loses its winning streak with me. 1994, where the nominees were Forrest Gump, Four Weddings and a Funeral, Pulp Fiction, Quiz Show, and The Shawshank Redemption. And the winner was Forrest Gump, and what should have won was Shawshank Redemption. This was a tough one because there were a lot of great films. Unlike a lot of people who seem to like to take a dump on Forrest Gump, I actually thought it was a great film. It was an emotionally moving film that told a great, fantastical story of one man's life, and it told it well. It was reminiscent of many of the great classic movies, and had this been another year, I would have said it deserved to win Best Picture. But Pulp Fiction and The Shawshank Redemption are two of the greatest movies of all time. I'm afraid Forrest Gump can't even begin to compete with these films. It was really hard for me to choose between them because had this been pretty much any other year, I think Pulp Fiction would deserve to win hands down for being a true original and one of Tarantino's best. It was a groundbreaking film in so many ways. But The Shawshank Redemption is just an epic film with one of the most amazing payoffs in film history and with some unbelievably good performances. Because it bombed at the box office at the time, I don't think they had any way of knowing what a classic and well-known movie this would become in the future. Had they known, I think it would have had a better chance of winning. So 1994 gets my nomination for Best Year for Oscar nominations. The Shawshank Redemption and Pulp Fiction gets my nominations for film that most deserved to win but didn't. And Four Weddings and a Funeral gets my nomination for film least worthy of being nominated. This was a below-average British romantic comedy with a Hugh fucking Grant that wasn't even close to being funny. I can't believe this was nominated. Next is 1995, where the nominees were Apollo 13, Babe, Braveheart, The Postman. That's an Italian film, not that crappy Kevin Costner post-apocalyptic film. The Oscars aren't that stupid. And Sense and Sensibility. And the winner was Braveheart. And what should have won was Braveheart. What can I say? Braveheart is another one of my all-time favorite films, and one of the times I think the Oscars actually got it right. It's a classic epic film about war, bravery. Even if it's incredibly historically inaccurate, it's still fantastic storytelling. I never saw The Postman. Apollo 13 was alright, and I despise with a passion films like Sense and Sensibility. But the film I think really didn't belong was Babe, which was okay for a kids movie, I guess, but when you compare it to real movies, it's really stupid. I have no idea why it was nominated. So, Braveheart gets my nomination for Best Choice for Best Picture, and Babe gets my nomination for film least worthy of being nominated. Next is 1996, where the nominees were The English Patient, Fargo, Jerry Maguire, Secret and Lies, and Shine. And the winner was The English Patient, and what should have won was Fargo. The English Patient's another film people like to crap on, and I don't think it was one of the greatest, but on the scale of boring films, this film actually isn't too bad. Films like Out of Africa and The Last Emperor are much worse. Yes, the movie was more slow-paced than it should have been, but it had a spectacularly depressing ending, so I appreciate this film. But I don't think it quite deserved to win Best Picture. I'd say Fargo deserved it more. One of the Coen brothers' best films, in my opinion. That being said, I wouldn't say Fargo was an amazing film or anything like that. It just happened to be the best out of what was nominated. So next is 1997, where the nominees were As Good as It Gets, The Full Monty, Good Will Hunting, LA Confidential, and Titanic. And the winner was Titanic, and what should have won was LA Confidential. Again, I don't think LA Confidential was a spectacular film, but it was the best out of what was nominated. Good Will Hunting would be a really close second, but Russell Crowe, Kevin Spacey, and Guy Pearce' excellent performances in LA Confidential edge it ever so slightly for me. Regardless of which one won, Titanic most assuredly should not have won. This film was mediocre at best, and it seemed the only reason it won was because of all the hype surrounding this film, and it had not an ounce of originality. All you need to do is watch the trailer for this film, and you've basically seen the whole film. Forbidden love story with a poor guy and a rich girl's asshole husband finds out and tries to kill the poor guy. Boat Darwin sinks, everybody dies. Nothing else you need to know. This film is so unbelievably overrated. So, Titanic gets my nomination for Least Worthy Movie to win Best Picture. And Armistead gets my nomination for Film That Most Deserved to win Best Picture but wasn't even freaking nominated. Armistead was another classic Spielberg movie in the same vein as Schindler's List, which I think was better than his 2011 film Lincoln, which was also about slavery. A severely underrated film. Next is 1998, where the nominees were Elizabeth, Life is Beautiful, Saving Private Ryan, Shakespeare in Love, and The Thin Red Line. And the winner was Shakespeare in Love, and what should have won, Saving Private Ryan. Shakespeare in Love, are you freaking kidding me? This movie was your average romantic comedy movie there was nothing special about it in any way. I guess it goes to show if you make a film about Shakespeare, the Oscars will jump all over it. Saving Private Ryan, on the other hand, an epic World War II story with a touching ending, one of the best World War II films of all time, in my opinion. It by far deserved the Oscar, so much more than Shakespeare in Love. It's impossible to measure. So, Shakespeare in Love gets my nomination for Least Worthy Movie to win Best Picture. And Saving Private Ryan gets my nomination for Film That Most Deserved to win Best Picture but didn't. Next is 1999, where the nominees were American Beauty, The Cider House Rules, The Green Mile, The Insider, and The Sixth Sense. And the winner was American Beauty. And what should have won was The Insider. I like American Beauty. I think it's a very good film, and I wouldn't say it didn't deserve to win Best Picture. But it's not quite the masterpiece everyone else seems to think it is. Whereas I do think The Insider was a masterpiece. I suppose I'm a little bit biased because I really like films about the media, but I think this is one of the best films about the media there is. It tells the story of a whistleblower who gets sold out by the media who was supposed to protect him because of corporate pressure. This was such an important story to tell, and the film told it so well. It really put you in the mindset of the whistleblower and what he went through. Also, The Sixth Sense is totally overrated. The whole movie was the surprise ending. Take that away and it's just an average ghost film that's really boring. So, The Sixth Sense gets my nomination for Film Least Worthy of Being Nominated. So, that's it for part 1 on what should have won the Oscars. Make sure you check out part 2 and 3, which I'll put links to in the description below, and make sure you subscribe to keep up with the other movie and TV videos that I do, and thanks a lot for watching.